We are really delighted to be here today. My name's Dave Ulrich. I'll introduce myself, then I'll introduce the session, and my wife, Wendy Ulrich. Actually, I'm going to introduce her, and she can introduce me. This is not scripted. That's a little... You like that? What should I say about her? Yeah.
How wonderful she is.
Okay, how wonderful she is. She's a great mother. How she treats her husband perfectly. Okay, that's all pretty true. Anyway, I'm delighted to work with Wendy. What will I tell? I'll tell one story. Wendy has, we moved to Los Angeles. Wendy had an undergraduate in a different degree. She decided to go to UCLA to get an MBA. We had 2 children at the time. I'll tell 2 quick stories. And she applied to the evening MBA program. She came out of a very different program called speech and drama. And not a lot of people in speech and drama go into MBAs. But she had great test scores. Because we had 2 children, she wanted to do the evening MBA.
Which is for?
Which is for fully employed people. So it's for folks who have a full-time job. She put down that her full-time job was motherhood. UCLA called and said, you have great test scores, you belong in the program, but you have to apply to the day program because motherhood is not a career. And she quickly said to them, why don't you think about that? Give me a call tomorrow. Or I'll call the LA Times. They called the next day and said, or a few years later, when she's doing her PhD, she has had the largest child in the history of Ann Arbor, where we did her PhD. She had a 13-pound son. So, and by the way, when the son was born, she looked at me and said, we're done. So those are her 2 claims to fame. You get to do a quick introduction.
And I want to be clear. We're talking natural childbirth.
Hold up a bag. Hand me this bag. Hand me this bag. This is what a 13-pound son looks like. So, and that's actually what he looked like when he came out. That's heavy. Okay.
So I will tell you a little bit about Dave. Dave has an interesting story. Let me think now. What am I going to tell you about him? Usually we don't do this, so this is kind of fun. Dave did his entire undergraduate BA degree in 5 semesters. I think that's pretty amazing about Dave. And for 1 year of that 2.5-year period, basically, we were married, and I was expecting our first child. So, you know, he was working in addition to going to school. So he is a compulsive workaholic. That's what I can tell you about Dave. And I can also tell you his main field of interest is human resources. So he's a business consultant. He's a professor at the University of Michigan, and he works primarily with the executive programs there. And a month ago, he was named the best thought leader in human resources in the world for the last 10 years, for the last decade. So.
We're going to move on. Okay. When we do talks,
See, you have to be careful because 2 can play this game.
Yeah, I know. I didn't have a 13-pound child, but I helped. Okay. When we do talks, we love to start by thinking, what's in your head? Because it's easy to come in and give a talk. And good teaching is not what we know, it's what you need to know. And so as we've struggled with this talk, we thought, you've sat through 4 or 5 days of a lot of stuff. And so we were tempted to come tell you everything we know in addition. And our bet is you're overloaded. And so our job today is to be a synthesizer, to be an integrator, to pull together some themes and have a conversation with you about what have we learned that will be helpful as emerging leaders going back from the ideas at this conference. Before we get into that, I have to do something. Every time there are conferences run, there are folks who are public and folks who are private that make it work. We have a gift today. The person who's the private person behind this conference is sitting in the back of the room. Lori Swim is not only the financial sponsor, she is the matriarch, she is the heart of this conference. And I think we should acknowledge Mrs. Swim for the incredible work she's done for this conference. With that, we'd like to end. By the way, I think, Lori, you would not have liked that, but I think most of you are here because of her graciousness, and most of you are getting ideas because of her insights. And we acknowledge that privately as well as publicly and offer our gratitude. So I'm going to get you thinking. Let's go to a next slide. We went through this session. You are the emerging leaders. By the way, look around. You're the best there is. That's kind of scary. We're going to do a bit of a review. We're going to give you 4 eyes to kind of pull together the themes. Let's go to the next slide. So we went through the program and we said, look at what you've heard in the emerging leader stream in the last 4 days. Pick a number 0 to 10. That's not a hard question. Number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've learned about media issues. Pick another number, 1 to 20. 14. You've learned about culture and casual sex. Woo. Pick another number, 0 to 20. 90? 19. Okay, I thought you just failed the first test. You had a session about couples talking about marriage. By the way, look at all those topics. You've had a lot of stuff thrown at you. And so the theme we picked is, the places you'll go. Where does that come from? Dr. Seuss. That's cool. So let's go to the next question. And by the way, look at all that stuff. By yourself for 30 seconds. Slide 4. What have I learned? What's inspired me? What have I committed to do because I've been there? So let's go back to the previous slide. This is the stuff on slide 3 that you've heard. Take 30 seconds. And if you want a copy of these slides, we're happy to send them to you. Send us an email, wulrich@rbl.net. Okay, wulrich@rbl.net, or DOU, which is mine, DOU@umich.edu.
And we'll put that up at the end again.
We'll put it up at the end. Okay, you got 30 seconds. What have you learned in this conference? What's inspired you? Write it down if you have a way to do that. Let's give 4 or 5 answers. Pick a color, sir. Pick a color.
Green.
Somebody wearing green. Huh. What did you put down?
Something that I put down is just the people that we've been listening to and how they've been able to make a difference. Just how one person is able to make a difference.
Oh, what a sweet thought, that one person can make a difference. And you had some great examples of that. Green. Who's got green on? That's sort of green.
One thing that really struck me is seeing so many young adults from all over the countries in the world, how we're not alone, and there's so many people who are not here who also share the family values, and how we can group together and unify.
Isn't it nice to be part of a community that we didn't know we had? Isn't it just wonderful to walk into a room and to find people who share our commitments and our values? Not green, but red. This is green? Super.
Particularly out of the session that happened this morning talking about pornography and human trafficking, there is, the human drama that is happening all around us is unbelievable and unacceptable. And I think, my background is in theater, so not making...
That means you're going to get an MBA.
So not making light of, but truthfully telling those stories in a way that's going to really land home for people.
Nice. You know, one of the things we leave with as emerging leaders is to take our agenda and have a message and have a story. By the way, in the strategy world, where I live as a business professor, the word story is getting moved. So and I'm here to give you some ideas that will help you. The word that's getting used is narrative. A story is an episode. A story is an event. A narrative has a past, present, and future. And so when we go back, we want to tell a narrative. We want to say, here's where we've been, here's where we are, and here's where we think we could go. Nice. One more person. Green.
Red.
And green.
Okay, great. I think I've really learned a lot from the example of the fellow delegates and scholars, especially about being a young family, and I've really learned from just seeing the example of all the really beautiful relationships and young marriages that we have in our community.
Nice, nice.
So the question I'm a psychologist, so the question I want to add to that one is anybody feeling a little overwhelmed or a little nervous about going back home? And what's scary? What's overwhelming? What's hard? What looks difficult? Please, right here.
I sometimes think that we feel like such a minority in other places, and here we feel unified as a majority, and that's a little bit nerve-wracking for me, at least.
It's nerve-wracking to be a part of the majority, and you kind of lose your identity?
Well, sure, but it's kind of nerve-wracking to be a minority having these feelings when I go back, exactly.
Perfect, please.
By the way, we're going to throw a lot of ideas at you in the business field, and before you comment, because we're going to make comments. This is an interactive session to pull together ideas. What we find in the business world is when you place someone who's different from the other people, so you place somebody who's diverse by race, by gender, by ethnicity, by culture, by heritage, they struggle when they're alone. What you need to have is 3. And the rule of thumb is 3. So if you're trying to create change, find at least 2 cohorts, because then you have a small community of folks you work with, and then you get more comfortable as you group of 3 try to help change others. Simple hint.
Awesome. I don't know about you guys, but I just certainly feel pressure that because we're young and we have ideas and we're passionate and we've been to university and we're out there, that there is our own pressure put on by ourselves, but also this pressure from the outside that, I don't know if you guys hear, you're young, your youth is on your side, you've got everything to offer right now, that for me, I have this fear that I'll miss an opportunity and that I won't make the most of what I've been given, and especially, say, this opportunity to come all the way from Australia is been the biggest blessing for my life, especially this year. And I think I'm like, every night this week I've been like, oh, I want to make, what have I learned? What can I make the most of? What can I do when I get back? What's the first thing I do? I'm like, you know what, just chill out, but it's still a fear.
Yeah, anybody else feeling that kind of nervousness? This is a big responsibility. You've got a lot on your plate, a lot you're trying to do. So thank you for clearing the path. That was very nice. So how do we clear the path for each other and for others? Where do we start is a really good question, isn't it? One thing I can tell you and I can promise you is yes, you will miss opportunities, and yes, you will fail. And that's life. And it's okay. And if there's one thing that I would pass on to the next generation, as I have learned from my own life, it would be that. Relax, chill. It will always come around again if you keep trying. So don't feel like you've got one shot at this. You've got many shots. You've got many opportunities. If you stay in the game and keep learning from the things that don't go well, you'll have another opportunity.
I've just been thinking a lot. I felt that same pressure and overwhelming thoughts throughout this week. But one thing that hit me very hard last night is many of us are religious, and a thought that came to me was a scripture that says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things shall work together for your good. And I believe as we hold strong to our faith and our values and put God first, that we will be able to do great things, but on our own, we are weak and cannot do it.
Okay, so we aren't just trying to do this by ourselves. We have other sources of help and support, spiritual support, as well as one another and other people around us. Excellent point, thank you. Yes, one more.
One of my husband's favorite quotes is never mistake activity for results. And I've been, we have kind of this on the mountain experience here, and I just want to go forth from here thinking carefully about the actions that I take, because we've seen a lot of actions taken, people see a wrong and they take an action, and then there are all kinds of negative consequences. And so I want to thoughtfully consider the actions I take, and I want good results. I don't just want good action.
That's such a good comment. We're looking for a result, not just activity. And one of my husband's colleagues has written an article many years ago that's been very influential in the world of business called "Rewarding A While Hoping for B." And he collected this whole series of examples of situations where a business put a policy in place hoping for something like, we hope that our salespeople will be able to be refreshed, be able to get a new car when they need one, that they'll have appropriate vehicles. So they put in a policy that says, when you have 50,000 miles on your car, we'll get you a new one. The goal, the thing they're hoping for, is to keep their sales force well supplied with a good car. What ended up actually happening was that people were spending their lunch hour driving around the freeway. Why? Because they wanted to rack up those miles to get the new car. So they're hoping for a refreshed, safe workforce. What they were actually rewarding for was something very different. So we do have to pay attention, don't we? What are the unintended things that we might be rewarding people for, or that might be the unintended consequences of just doing without really thinking through? We go, okay, somebody really wants to say.
Last comment.
Okay, last comment. I told some of you guys about the project that we wanted to do, and yesterday I was feeling so overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, can I actually do this? Can I do this? And I was a little frustrated and overwhelmed and feeling sick because I was trying to get a meeting with our team together, and it just wasn't working out. And Kelly had told me something earlier that day, that if it is for the right reason, if we are doing this work for God, if it is for Him, then the right people will just fall into our place. Everything will just fall into place. And after the concert, I came back and I was just like, oh well, whoever, I don't know what's going to happen. If you want this to go forward, make it go forward. And for some reason, everybody on our team just came to that table. They just showed up there. And that was kind of a testimony to me that I told God that I want to be a part of this pro-family movement. And if we trust Him, and if we work in partnership with Him, then everything that is supposed to happen will fall into place and be successful.
Excellent.
I'm going to move us forward, just for time. I'm going to move us forward. Quick question. I'll let you talk after. By the way, we want each of you to have an experience that this conference is not an end, it's a beginning. And it's a beginning of something we can do as emerging leaders that's profound. Our job in the next hour and a half is to help you think about how do we recreate and establish that new beginning. So I'm going to give you a test. How many of these numbers can you find in a row?
Is there a timeline?
Huh?
Is there a time limit?
You have 45 seconds, it says on the slide.
Okay, so you got to
In 45 seconds, how many can you find in a row? One is at the top left. You have 45 seconds. Some of you are taking a picture of it and emailing it to a friend. This is called a helpline. You have 20 seconds. Okay, let's go back to page 4. How many found over 20? Oh, by the way, you would have on Monday because you had more energy. How many found more than 15? Cool. This is by a test for those who want to hire you, and we're keeping, no. More than 10? By the way, let's go to slide 5. It's complicated. They're big, they're small. Does that feel a little bit like this week? Boy, we've got a lot of ideas. They're big, they're small, they're sideways, they go every which way. How do you make sense out of all that stuff so that I can have my personal mission that works for me? And your mission may not be my mission. And that's okay. Let's go to slide 6. Do it again. Oh. By the way, if you're having trouble as you look at that and it's not working for you, you have to come back again. Go with me across the top, like tic-tac-toe. Top left 1, then 2, then top right 3. In the middle, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, and 9. Did anyone see the pattern before? With this, you can see it. By the way, here's one of the things we've learned about turning ideas into impact. And that's the message we wanted to give today. How does all these ideas we've heard have an impact in my life and the lives of those I care about? And our job is to help you turn ideas into impact. We've learned something about ideas with impact. Next slide. By the way, does everybody see it? Sometimes it's really fun to see the theory behind the framework. Why is the U.S. freeway system numbered the way it's numbered? Ooh. What? North, south, east, west. Evens go east and west. Odds go north and south. So if I'm on 95, I'm going north and south, and 5s and 10s go nationwide. So why is it 95 and not 23? It's percent of land mass. By the way, there's a framework, there's a theory, there's an underlying rationale. East, west, north, south, 5s and 10s, percent of land mass. By the way, that's useful in Trivial Pursuit. One of you will get 50 points. But what's the value? Is there a framework or way to think? Now, let me go to the lessons learned, slide 7. Here's what we've learned. Leaders who are successful have the capacity to learn. And Wendy's going to talk more about that, a growth mindset. But here's what learning means. It means I have great diversity, lots of options. I zoom out, I see lots of things. But if I stay zoomed out, what's going to happen? Look at all these things I could do from this conference. I've got a list of 30 priorities. And what's going to happen? Nothing. Then you got to focus. You got to zoom in. But if I only zoom in and say, there's one project I'm going to do forever, what's going to happen? You don't learn. You don't grow. One of the lessons we've learned that leaders have is knowing when to zoom out. The last 4 days have been a zoom out. I have zoomed out. I've seen new stuff. That's multiple options. Now I got to focus in. What could I actually work on? And where do I focus? And that cycle of going in and out, diversity, convergence, is what great leaders do. And we're going to try to do some of that with you today.
So we want to try to cover the following chart, and some of it more divergent and some of it more convergent, to look at 4 things. How do we internalize what we've done? How do we make it real to us? Because frankly, the most impact that is likely to come out of this for you right now is on you. How am I going to change? What am I going to do different? Is one of the levels of impact that you're going to come out of this conference, we hope, with. Applying those ideas inside of yourself. We also want to look at how do I influence others? How do I help others to get the ideas that I think are important and the values that I think are important into their lives? And then the third level is, how do I institutionalize this? How do I begin to have an impact on schools and governments and private agencies and churches and communities? How do I begin to institutionalize the changes that I want to make? And finally, how do I embed it? How do I sustain it? How do I keep it going? How many of you have tried to lose weight at some point in your life? How many of you have been successful?
I will stand up.
How many of you have been successful? How many of you, after you've been successful, have found that you've gained some of that weight back again? That's the hardest part, isn't it? Some of us have gained more than we lost to begin with. That's been my constant problem. It's hard to sustain.
Let me thank my wife for sharing that example. Because I'm gaining weight right now. So
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So we're trying to, Dave gets to be Vanna White now, it's his turn. Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change. And that is something that I have learned over and over and over again. I found as a psychologist that one of the most frustrating experiences was how often people would come in my office and what they were really looking for is, how do I get my spouse to change? How do I get the world to change? How do I get my parents to change, my children to change, my boss to change? But when I started talking to them about what are you willing to do to change, what do you think would help you, if you began to become that change, what do you think, where would you start? People got really resistant really fast sometimes. It's hard for us to change. It's hard for us to take a hard look at what do I need to do differently, not what just do I need to tell everybody else to do differently. So we want to look at that for a minute if we can. The first step in internalizing that change is to figure out what you want. If you ran into that stoplight, what would you think? A little stressful. Any of you feeling a little bit like that right now? I don't know where to go. I don't know which is the green for me. I don't know what's the yellow, the caution sign. I got 60 million different things telling me, go this way, go that way. I don't really know where I belong. And so the first question is, what do I want? I've been wrestling with that question my entire life as I've tried to figure out who do I want to marry, as I've tried to figure out what am I going to do for schooling, as we've tried to figure out where do we want to live. And I found great comfort in a statement by Abraham Maslow, who's a great psychologist, that he said it isn't natural to know what you want. It's a rare and difficult psychological achievement. Does that make anybody besides me feel a little better? You know, it's not normal to just know what you want. Now, who has a brother, a sister, a friend who's like, I have always wanted to be a lawyer. I know that's what I want to do. There are a few. We have a few of those kind of folks who at least in some area of their lives have just sort of always known what they wanted to do. My husband always wanted to be a lawyer. He's not. So it's kind of helpful to realize even when we get on a course and we think we know exactly what we want, it doesn't mean we're going to stay there forever. It takes a lot of self-reflection. For me, it takes a lot of prayer. It takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of pondering to figure out what I want. My sister has had a little magnet on her refrigerator. There's great wisdom in kitchen magnets. Hers said, life's greatest tragedies occur when we give up what we want most for what we want now. Life's greatest tragedies occur when we give up what we want most for what we want now. So knowing what we want, it's not enough to just say, well, I want French fries. I'm hungry, is it? We've got to figure out what we want most and how what we want now might be interfering with getting what we want most. So this is a complicated problem. And I just want to really encourage you over the next day or two, if you're flying home someplace, take some time on the airplane to sit down with this question. If you've got some time over the weekend, if you're spending some time on your Sabbath, whatever it might be, take some time to really give yourself the opportunity to reflect on this question. I spend a lot of personal time looking at that question, even today, as a very, very old lady. What do I want? What do I want most? What do I need now is part of that, is helpful. But really giving ourselves time to really contemplate that and think about it is an important step in this process. Go back for just a second on that one. When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with a career and education at one point in time, I'd gotten that MBA, I'd gotten that speech and drama education degree, and my husband had been working on his PhD at UCLA in organizational behavior, which was a field I really enjoyed. I really liked it. That's what I had done my MBA in, was organizational behavior, which is kind of organizational psychology. And I had sort of figured out about my husband that he's a workaholic, and that if my children wanted to know their father, it was a good thing for me to be in school and be gone part of the time, because he's extraordinarily supportive of anything I want to do, and he would be home and be with the kids while I was in class. So I was thinking about getting a PhD. Now, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, so that was a big stretch for me. I had no idea how this went. But when I watched him do it, I thought, oh, you break it down in little pieces and you do one at a time. I think I can do this. So I was debating between two fields, psychology and organizational behavior, and I went back and forth on this for months, trying to decide which one I was going to do. I was reading a book, which I can highly recommend to you if you are struggling with similar questions, called What Color is My Parachute? It was still around 40 years ago, and the guy updates it every year, and it's still around today. And there was a question in that book, as I was reading along, that caught my attention. The question was, what would you do with your life if you were guaranteed success? Think about that question for a minute. What would you do in your life if you were guaranteed success? Well, I thought about that question, and I immediately thought, oh, well, I'd be a psychologist. And then I was really confused. I was like, wait a minute. 10 seconds ago, I was still in the, I can't decide what to do, whether to be a psychologist or an organizational behavior specialist. How come I suddenly know? What do you think? How come I suddenly knew? Well, because I was guaranteed success. I overcame the fear, and I realized, okay, why was that such an important question to me? And I realized it was because I was afraid. I knew I wanted to be a psychologist, but I was afraid I would be a bad one. I was afraid it would mess up my kids. They would all be the psychologist children, you know, how those people are. And I was afraid that I would fail at it. But I also realized it would be pretty stupid to spend the next 7 years of my life preparing for a career that I only went into because I don't care enough about it to be bothered if I fail at it. And I realized I have to make a really hard decision here. I have to be willing to fail. If I'm not willing to fail, then I will end up spending my life doing things that aren't really very important to me, just because I don't care if I fail. So then the next question I would pose to you is, what do you care so much about that even if you were guaranteed to fail, you would still be willing to spend your life trying to do that thing? Because we will fail, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to promise you. We will fail at many things. There were some things I did well as a psychologist, and I had lots of failures. And if we're not willing to fail, we're going to end up on a second-tier life doing things that just aren't that important to us. So, something to keep in mind. So, taking responsibility for what we want is the next step. When you're a teenager, when you're in a youth program at church or you're in school, it's easy to sort of assume somebody else is responsible for helping you get what you want. But at this stage in life, we're trying to figure out, how do I take responsibility for getting what I want? If I want a friend, how do I take responsibility? If I want a job, how do I take responsibility? If I want a family, how do I take responsibility for getting what I want? I have a really good friend who started a lot of different jobs in her life. She started a lot of different really creative things. She said, my father always taught me that I could do anything I wanted if I wasn't afraid to fail. That's really been helpful to me, to realize that failure is not a shameful thing. So you can do anything you want if you're willing to both succeed and fail and grow from both. I want to talk for a minute today about something called a growth mindset. And this is from a professor at Stanford University by the name of Carol Dweck. She's an education professor. She had a really interesting question. She wanted to know, how do kids become more resilient? What makes the difference between kids who fail and get up and keep moving, and kids who fail and sit down and stop? Is that a question of interest to you? Yeah, me too. So she started looking at kids, and she did a little exercise with them. She gave them some puzzles. They weren't this kind of puzzle. They were logic puzzles. She went into grade schools, and she gave these kids these logic puzzles to work on, and they would work on them for a while. And she started with easy ones that the kids had fun with. And then when the kids are having a good time, they're having fun doing the puzzles, she gives them the next puzzle, and it was really hard. And she watches to see how these kids are going to respond. And what she found is that the kids fell into two groups. So think about yourself. You're back in elementary school. You're playing with the little puzzles. The puzzle gets really hard. What do you do next? There was one group of kids who started saying things like, I've got a stomach ache. I can't find my eraser. The teacher hasn't shown us puzzles like this before. I don't know how to do them. We don't do puzzles like this in my classroom, in my family. Looking out the window, getting distracted, getting discouraged, getting sick to their stomach, blaming somebody else was kind of how they did when things got hard. There was another group of kids who had a different response. They leaned in when the problem got hard. They got really focused. They asked for appropriate help in trying to figure out the answers, not to tell me the answer, but to give me a little clue that might give me a starting place. They used the resources around them. They got grins on their faces. They said things like, I knew this was going to be informative. Can't you just hear some little 9-year-old saying that? And she was trying to figure out what was the difference between these two groups of people. She finally concluded that the first group had what she called a fixed mindset. They believed that people are sort of born a certain way. You're either smart or you're not smart. You're either talented or you're not talented. You're either good at puzzles or you're not good at puzzles. You're either going to have a family or you're not going to have a family. You're either a successful leader or you're not. You either have the talent for it or you don't. And if I've been told all my life that I'm good at this stuff, I believe it for a while, but what happens when something starts to prove that's wrong, that I'm not very good? What do? I give up, I hide, I try to make sure nobody knows that I have suddenly failed the test and I'm no longer smart after all, right? The other group of kids believed that no matter how smart you are, you can get better. No matter how talented you are, you can learn more. That they had it right, that our brains are not just fixed the day we're born with a certain level of IQ or talent for music, that no matter what was going on in our head from our genetic inheritance, there's a lot we can do to improve. She called that a growth mindset. So we've got the two kind of matched up here. You might take a look at that chart. If you had to choose on each of those little things which one you are, where would you end up? I was really encouraged, I have to tell you, when this professor at Stanford University of Education said she realized the old saying was true. When the student is ready, the teacher will come. She said, these kids were my teachers because I was on the left side of the board, trying to hide when I didn't know what was going on, sticking with tasks that were easy for me, doing things I was good at, and not venturing into the growth side very much. And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when I read this book, I thought, I'm on the left side too. I don't take enough risks. I don't bounce back very well. When things get hard, I get discouraged. I just want to get it over with. I just want to make a decision. I just want to get through it. I don't really focus in on the right side. How do I analyze the problem? How do I try harder? How do I break it down, practice more? I especially think it's interesting in our family perspective. Do you see the one about 4 lines down? On the fixed mindset, I want a partner who will cherish and delight in me just as I am. Fixed mindset. Isn't that interesting? I want a marriage that I know is going to work. I want to know we're completely compatible. I want to know we've done everything we can to be economically in a place where we're ready to have a family. Dave was 21 years old and I was 23 when we got married. I was finished with college, he wasn't. We had no visible means of support. We got pregnant right away. We were crazy. And we did it, and we got through it, and we survived. Yeah, marriage is hard. Of course it's difficult. There have been times when we've been ready to kill each other. It's okay. That's the nature of the beast. It doesn't mean there's something wrong when things get hard. On the other side of the board, back one more. On the other side of the board, I want a partner who will encourage me to grow and develop. How does your partner encourage you to grow and develop? How do they do that? One way is they support you. What's another way that your partner encourages you to grow and develop? They conflict with you and they challenge you. Exactly right. That kind of growth is the meat and potatoes of marriage that we don't get to. We don't get to grow unless we get conflict and challenge in our lives. So, do you have a fixed or a growth mindset about these different things? You can have a different mindset about different things in your life. Do you have a fixed or a growth mindset about whatever's on your mind today that you're worried about or feeling overwhelmed about? Do you have a fixed or a growth mindset about having a fixed or a growth mindset? Do you see it as something you either have or you don't? Or can you imagine the possibility that you can grow into it? So let's make this a little personal for a minute. Would you think for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, we'll give you 15. What's a time in your life when you have faced a major regret or failure or challenge or loss? Think about the worst one you can think of if you want to. I won't ask you to share it, so just put it in your own head and think of a word or an image that captures that for you for a second. What's been your biggest failure to date? Maybe a failure to live your own values. Maybe a failure in school. Now the next question. What did you learn from that experience that has made you a better person? What did you learn from it that has the potential to strengthen others? What do you feel best about in how you handled that very difficult time? I am going to ask you to share this one, so just in a word or two, don't tell us the situation, but just in a word or two. What did you learn that can strengthen someone else? What did you learn that made you a better person? What do you feel best about in how you handled it? Anybody willing to share? Please.
I learned that my opinion matters and so do other people, and that everyone is valuable and their relationship is valuable.
Okay. I learned that everyone is valuable and that my opinion and other people's opinions are equally valid. Yes, please, over here. We'll take both of you.
I learned I'm stronger than I thought I was.
I learned I'm strong.
I learned better coping mechanisms.
I have better coping mechanisms than I thought I did.
I learned that I'm not the enemy.
I'm not the enemy. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. Anybody else? Please, back here.
I've learned that tomorrow is always better than today.
I've learned to hang in there. Tomorrow's going to be a little better if I just hang on. Yeah, please.
I learned how to rely on the Lord.
I learned how to rely on God. Valuable lesson, huh? Please. Let's say a few more.
That failure can be a good thing because it produces humility in you.
I learned humility.
That grace increases as the struggle increases.
Grace increases as the struggle increases.
Hi. I learned that the truth will always find its way, no matter the circumstances.
I learned to trust the spirit of truth, no matter what the circumstances.
It's okay to grieve.
It's okay to grieve. I learned that by my own experience. Please.
I learned that I'm not what I do.
I'm not what I do. I learned I'm not what I do. I am something different from just what I do.
I learned what it really means to love someone.
I learned about love. Yeah.
I can stand up for my standards even when others don't respect it.
Okay. Now let's just think about the things we've heard and the things we haven't heard that would follow on that same line. If the entire world knew by their own experience just what you've said, you've learned from yours, would it make a difference in the world we live in? Are some of the most important things we learn in this life things we learn from failure and regret and loss and adversity? In my theology, would even say we learn the things that are the reason we're here. To learn about love, to learn about humility, to learn about how can we be more like God. These are the things that make him who he is, aren't they? And when we learn these things by our own experience, we learn something of incredible worth. So, be careful what you praise, be careful what you blame. When you praise kids for, oh, you're just so smart, what are we teaching them? Smart, you're something you either are or you're not. How many of you were told when you were a kid, you're just so smart? Yeah, me too. I told my kids that all the time. I read this book and I was like, oh, crap. What do we praise them for instead? You tried so hard. You're working really hard here. That was great to ask that question. Thank you for being curious. You kept with that even when you didn't know the answer. And we can talk to ourselves that way too, right?
One of the first things we hope you get out of this 4 days is the first I. How do I internalize the question? What matters to me? What do I want? What a privilege to go away for 4 days and think. Quick anecdote, and it ties into what I think matters. 5 years ago, I was on my way to another country in the airport, and it was a Sunday morning. And I had one of those impressions that you all get once in a while. It said, call home. And I thought, okay, I call my mom a lot. I called my mom. Quick background. Did any of your parents grow up poor? Really poor? My mom grew up in a city in the United States. She did not have hot water. She did not have a bathroom. She had an outhouse. She did the weekly shower where she heated water. Because she was poor, she grew up and her mindset was, do your duty. We don't want you to have that same experience. So I'm in the airport. I called my mom on a Sunday morning. I said, Mom, how's it going? She said, oh, it's great. The sun is shining. The grass is growing. The flowers are blooming. Your dad had a stroke. It's a great day. And I said, Mom, go back. Dad had a stroke. Yeah, he's okay. Where are you going? Well, I'm going to a meeting in another country. And she said, oh, you got to go do that meeting. Mom, how serious is Dad? Oh, he's fine. You'll be back at the end of the week. Everything's great. Mom, how serious is Dad? Well, he's pretty serious. I got on the phone. I called my client in another country. And I said, my father's really sick. And my client said, how sick is he? And I said, why are you asking that? And he said, because you have an obligation to be here. You said you would do this talk. There's 100 people showing up. You need to be here. And I said, my father's really sick. I'm not coming. And he said, you must live up to that obligation. And I heard my mom's voice in my mind. But listen to the question Wendy asked you with. What do I want? What matters to me? And let me be clear. What matters to me is my family. And that's what I hope you are walking away from this session with. So I said, my father's really sick. I need to go home. He said, if you don't show up at this meeting, we will badmouth you in this company and in this country. And you will never again give a talk in this country. And at that point, I don't swear very often, but I said, you go to hell. And I went home. And I spent a day with Dad before he died. Let me be really clear. That question, what do we want in this family conference? Boy, does that matter. Boy, does that matter. I've had 5 years of delight that my dad and I had a moment to end before he had an opportunity to move on. What if I'd done the other? We beg of you as emerging leaders, internalize this. Know what you want. By the way, they've lived up to that obligation. They've blackballed me. And what do I say to them? Yeah. No, what I say is, when I die, I'll come visit you in hell. No, I don't say that.
I just want to make sure that we're all clear that what we learned from Professor Ulrich today was to tell people to go to hell. Is that okay? Just making sure.
Move on. Just get that internalization. Okay, next one.
All right.
Go ahead.
Can you go back one real quick? these are some other things you can do to practice that growth mindset that I just want to hit really quickly. Find your own stories about growth. What Carol Dweck found was that she could improve kids' performance just by giving them a one-paragraph story to read about somebody who persisted in the face of failure. Just prompting ourselves with those stories can help. And these are some questions you can ask yourself and the people around you. Stop asking people, how was your day? Nobody cares about that question, right? What was hard today? How'd you stick with it? So let's practice these for a minute. Pick one of those questions that you like and ask the person next to you that question, okay? Ask the person next to you the question you like the best. What was hard? What bugged you? What problem came up? What tempted you? What did you experiment with? And what did you learn from those things? 1, 2, 3, go. That was a great story.
I was just trying to keep it.
Just
Great exercise.
give them a little exercise here, and then I will go through the rest quickly. So if I'm done in 10 minutes, will that be enough? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did you learn something that you might not have learned if you just asked somebody how their day was? Fun question, and one you can ask yourself at the end of the day as well. A young friend of mine, her mother would ask her every day, who did you help today? That was her little prompt. She said, my mother, as she got to be a little older, she said, my mother doesn't ask me that question anymore, but I ask myself that question every day. I don't tell my mother the answer, I tell God. And I like that. What's the question you want to report on at the end of the day to yourself and to whoever matters most to you? Okay, so the next question we want to talk about for a minute is influence. Assuming you've figured out what you want and you've figured out how to have that resilience and not be too afraid to fail, to go after what really matters most to you, the next step is you got to figure out how to influence others. What percent of the time is the leading scorer, the winner of the Golden Boot, on the team that wins the Gold Cup? What's your guess? Everybody, this is 100% of the time, 10, right? This is 50% of the time. Everybody hold up what you think. What percent of the time is the leading scorer on the team that wins the Gold Cup? Only the men are voting? That's all right. 30%, 40%, 0%, 10%, 50%, 70%. The answer is 15%. 15% of the time, the person who gets the most points wins the Gold Cup. What does that teach you? Think about it for a minute. What do you learn from that? Yeah. Keep shooting. Okay, what else? Teamwork, yeah. The best team is going to beat the best individual. So you've got a really great vision of what you want. You know where you're going. What do you need next? You need a team. You need other people. People who are different from you, people who are like you. You need both. Let's look at another similar kind of situation. Who, you know, the best actor or the best actress is, how many times are they the one who's in the best picture for that year? Again, about 15 to 20%. So, influencers, how do they do it? These are some of the influencers in the world we live in. Anybody you don't recognize up there? Top left. This is Sheikh Zayed. He is the sheikh that brought together the United Arab Emirates from a group of warring tribes and families. into a united group that worked together. Very influential, very powerful man, but he did it by saying we've got to work together and stop fighting amongst ourselves. Anybody else you don't recognize? Bottom what? Middle. Bottom middle?
Hey, come on. Who knows who he is?
Ever heard of Billy Graham? Yeah, okay. Anybody else? These are influential leaders in the world that we live in. They're influential, I will say, because of two things. One, they are absolutely credible people because they live the values that they are espousing. They do what they say they'll do. And two, because they have really good ideas that inspire people and help them want to do better. So, if we're going to live the values of marriage and family, we got to do them in our marriages and in our families, don't we? And we've got to then take those values into the world. How in our marriage do we learn to get along with people we are inherently incompatible with? There's a very well-known marriage family therapist who says, every one of us marries someone with whom we are inherently incompatible. That's not too encouraging, is it? But it's probably true. We marry people that over time we begin to realize we're different and we have to learn how to get along. And when we're trying to make a difference in the world we live in, we're basically trying to figure out how to get the Republicans and the Democrats to talk to each other in a civil way, right? We're basically trying to learn how to get people that don't agree with us to be willing to trust us and listen to us because we were willing to listen to them. Pastor Johnson, Wednesday morning, I loved his, he had a line, we want to practice committed civility. He said there are people in the world who are committed and people who are civil, and we don't often get them both together at the same time. And I loved that. Are we practicing committed civility? Okay, so how do we practice that? First one, make bids. Today you just each made a bid to someone. You asked them a question and you listen to their response. That's all a bid is. It's asking somebody to pay attention to you for a minute. And when we make bids to people, it's a very small step that basically says, I am interested in you. I'm curious about you. I care about you. I want to know what you think about the world. And when we respond to the bids that other people make, we're willing to open ourselves up to be vulnerable to what somebody else is wanting to know about us. This is important in marriage, it turns out. You'd think we'd get this down by the time you're married, but we don't. And it's important in the world we live in. We need to see conflict as an opportunity. How is conflict an opportunity? How is conflict an opportunity? Somebody made that point earlier. Yeah, please. How is conflict an opportunity?
It's an opportunity to be able to learn new things. Like, you don't ever learn something from someone who agrees with you.
Perfect. It's an opportunity for us to learn.
Once the conflict is resolved, then the world is a better place.
Okay. It's an opportunity to make a difference for good. Yeah.
Because something's going to have to change.
Something's going to change when we've got conflict. I had a teenage daughter that didn't always see the world the way I saw it. And it was a real challenge for us, for both of us, to try to figure out how to talk to each other. But I kept that phrase in my mind constantly. How do I use this conflict? How do I use this disagreement to help this young woman to know I'm on her side? What do I have to say to convince her that I am not the enemy, I am on her side? How can I listen in a way that convinces her I'm worth listening to? How do I convince her by the way I treat her that I'm on her side? That's the opportunity in conflict. And today, we've worked that out. We still are very different on many things, but we listen to each other respectfully, and we both believe, even when we are in very different places, that we can trust each other. And that's been a major lesson of my life. In marriage, one of the great marriage researchers says, we need to look at 4 things in our lives that he found predicted divorce with an extremely high rate of accuracy. He could watch people interact for 15 minutes, a married couple, and predict their possibility of divorce with, is it 70%? I can't remember now. 92% accuracy. How'd you like to sit in his lab for 15 minutes? And he found that there were 4 things that predicted divorce: criticism, contempt. Do you know what contempt looks like? Rolling your eyes, turning away, calling people names, sarcasm. Criticism, contempt, stonewalling. What's stonewalling? I treat you as if you were a stone wall, right? Basically, I'm saying, I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to ignore this. And defensiveness. Anybody else besides me get defensive when people criticize you or don't like you? The more of those things he saw in a relationship, the more likely it was to end in divorce. What we need to replace it with, he said, was to be calm, to be curious, and to be compassionate. Might those things be helpful to you as you're trying to build your team, as you're trying to be an influence in the world for good? To be calm, curious, and compassionate. Do other people feel better about themselves, including people who don't agree with you? Do they feel clearer about their own direction? Do they feel more resilient because of interactions with you? Do you leave people feeling better about who they are, is really what that one's about. Apologizing and forgiving are 2 of the big ones, aren't they? In marriage and in any relationship. I like the statement on the right. Apologizing doesn't always mean you're wrong and the other person's right. It just means you value your relationship more than your ego. I had a little story with this one. Let me see if I've got time. I've got a little story with this one with my son when he was about 9. And he was the 13-pounder, okay? So by the time he's 9 years old, he's almost as tall as I am. He's now 6'7". He's got a wingspan of about 7'5", you know. Big guy, big kid. And when he was little, he was the youngest in our family. And his 2 older sisters, who were still bigger than he was, didn't like it very much because when he would get mad and he would get upset, he would just haul off and hit them. Now that wasn't too good. And I kept, you know, we tried everything. I'm supposed to be a psychologist at this point, and I'm trying timeouts, and I'm trying reasoning, and I'm trying rewards, and I'm trying punishment, and I'm trying everything I can think of, and I'm getting nowhere. So I talked to a colleague of mine. I said, what do I do with my kid? You know, he just hits people. And my colleague said, well, where do you think he learned that? And I said, I don't know. We don't hit people in my family. You know, we don't hit. He said, well, did you spank him when he was little? Maybe a few times, once in a while. And he said, well, there's your problem. And I said, well, I probably haven't spanked him since he was 3. You know, what am I supposed to do with that? And he said, well, I guess you better apologize. I said, I don't think he even remembers that I spanked him. He said, don't count on it. Well, I didn't like that answer very much. I didn't want to bring up to my 9-year-old, your mother was really an idiot when you were 3 and spanked you, you know, that. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know, he's right. It's part of my value system that when you're wrong, you apologize, and I do think I was wrong. So one night when I'm tucking him in, I said, hey, Mike, can I talk to you for a minute? He said, sure, Mom. I said, do you happen possibly to remember, like when you were a little boy, a long, long time ago, that maybe once in a while you got spanked? And his whole demeanor just changed, and he said, yeah. And I thought, okay, I'm in trouble. And then I got curious. I said, so how often do you remember getting spanked? He said, every day. So much for, you know, he didn't remember, right? And I was really humbled because he was really mad. And I didn't do a great job of this apology. You know, I was feeling a little defensive, but I did say, you know, Mike, just want you to know, you didn't get spanked every day, I can promise you, but I can appreciate that it feels that way to you. And that's not the point. The point is, I was wrong. And I'm really sorry. And I hope you'll forgive me. You deserved a better approach than that. He just sat there, he didn't say a word, and I didn't know what else to say. I'm feeling really embarrassed and stupid, and I finally just said, well, maybe we can talk about this again sometime. And he just kind of nodded his head, and I slunk out of the room, and I thought, well, that went well, you know. About 2 weeks went by, and he had a little disagreement with one of his sisters, and he went to raise his hand like this, and he caught my eye out of the corner of his eye, and he looked at me. And he put his hand down. And to my knowledge, that boy, who is now 32 years old, has never hit another human being. Mike didn't have a problem with hitting. He had a problem with me. And I learned the value of an apology in that situation. When he was about 15, we were coming home from a church activity. He'd been playing basketball at the church, and I'd been teaching a little lesson, and that story had come to mind in answer to a question that somebody had raised. I hadn't told it to anybody, you know, up to that point. I just had kind of forgotten it, but I remembered it. I told the story. So Mike and I are driving home in the car, and he said, so how'd your talk go, Mom? And I said, oh, I think it went okay. You know, I told that story about when I had to apologize to you for spanking you when you were little. He looked at me and he said, you spanked me when I was little? And I was like, yeah. You don't remember this? This was like the traumatizing experience of my mothering career? You don't remember this conversation? And he said, no, I don't remember this. I said, you don't remember being spanked when you were little? He said, no, you never spanked us. And I was like, okay, well, yes, I did, but I was wrong and I apologize. You don't remember this? I mean, really, it changed reality for him to be apologized to and asked for forgiveness when he was 9 years old. We can turn the clock back and change people's stories by being willing to say, I'm so sorry. I screwed up. How do I make it right? How do I make it better? I really commend that to you.
You've had an incredible 4 days. You've got a lot of stuff. You've got a lot of material. 2 things we hope you've got so far. The first one is internalize it. What do I want? What am I going to learn and grow from this conference? The second is become an influencer. How do I help others? I think those are very nice. Have you answered the question? What do I want from this conference? What will make me a better leader? The second one, who am I going to influence? How many are married? How many would like to influence their spouse? Let me give you a hint, give up. You have no chance in Hades of doing that. So that's just not going to happen. But that's okay, you'll live with that. But find a way to influence. And those are the efforts and the tools that Wendy gave you get there. I now come to the third thing we hope you do. How do I create the right culture? How do I create the right institution? What is a culture? What is a company's culture? Well, first of all, let me go back. Where are the places you can leave this conference and demonstrate your leadership? What are the settings where you can demonstrate your leadership? What? In your family. By the way, if there's any place that's primary, that's probably it. Because if we can't model, I think the influencers Wendy listed, does anyone know what Pope Francis is, he was named for whom? This is, by the way, if you don't get this, who was Pope Francis named for? St. Francis. If you didn't get Pope Francis was named for St. Francis, you're in trouble. It's like at Disney. What's the most common question? What time is the 4 o'clock parade? Anyway, think about that. It's not a complicated question. What was St. Francis known for? Here was the saying. We preach the gospel and sometimes use words. By the way, I think that's one of the great sayings. We preach the gospel and sometimes use words. Okay. Where else are we going to influence? Families?
Our relationships and assignments in church.
Church. If we're how many are active in their church? Do those churches have a culture? Do they have a way of thinking? Are we active there? Do we find a community there of folks we believe in and share values with? Nice. Where else can we influence? Family, church. School. How many are in school? How many think school sometimes has a culture that's not always perfect? So family, church, school, work. How many work? How many have a job or have been in a company where the culture is bad? Why? What made it bad? What was it? Bad leadership? What was bad? One behavior that was bad. Complaining, bemoaning, criticizing, caustic. What was that?
Corruption.
Corruption. Oh man, you're from Idaho. You're from Idaho. That was a bad American joke. Nobody got that. Let me challenge each of you. Even though you're an emerging leader, not a leader, you can shape the institutions where you live and work. And I'm going to give you one hint for doing it. 2 hints. First, let me show you what cultures look like. We're going to go quickly. Who would like to work in this company? Go again. Go again. Go again. Go again. One more. Let's go back. What company was that? Who works in Google? Who would like to work in Google? By the way, be careful what you ask for. Google is cool. They have free food. They have places you can take a nap. They have all these things you can do. That's also called a prison. They have free food. They have places you can take a nap. And they have all these things you can do. So Google, though, has an incredible culture. Here's the simple hint at managing culture in your family, in your church, in your school, or in your work. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. When we think of culture, it's not an event. It's not even a pattern of events. It's an identity. It's what we want to be known for by our customers, if you're in a business. Who's been married less than 2 years? Super. What do you want your family to be known for? You and your partner, what do you want to be known for? When people look at us, they see us as, what was that? Good examples. Wonderful. Committed. Happy family. Do you have an answer? No? Okay. They see us as happy singles. You didn't get that. That was a good joke. By the way, if you're in a company, if you're in school, our obligation as leaders is to say, what do we want to be known for by those who use those services? So what do I want my family to be known for? Happy family. Are we then behaving against that identity? Culture is the identity of what you're known for by those who use your services. Church. Who's active in church? What do I want my church group to be known for? Exclusivity. We criticize people who don't believe the way we do. Whose church is that? Nobody's. Oh, one person. By the way, everybody's going to contact you to change. What do I want my church to be known for? What do I want this church community to be known for? Who's active in a church? What do I want us to be known for? Service, compassion. By the way, when I think of your church, I think of service, I think of love, I think of compassion. What do you want your church to be known for? Good. Living our beliefs. Living a Christ-like life, as Christ would have us live. By the way, it could also be a Muslim belief, living as Allah would have us live. I want a church to have an identity. As a young person, in your family, in your church, in your school, and in your work, constantly ask the question, what is it we want to be known for? And are we behaving consistent with that? My world is companies. Name a company you admire. Name a company you admire. Who? Pixar. What does Pixar, how many know Pixar? What does Pixar want to be known for? When you look at firms doing movies and theater and action, what does Pixar want to be known for? Creativity, innovation, fresh ideas. By the way, who should be articulating that? The old leaders or the young leaders? Both. As emerging leaders, we can help the executives. By the way, companies make mistakes when they get known for a culture that was the past, not the future. As emerging leaders, you represent what we're known for in the future. And we can help our leaders see that. If you're in a company and it feels like we're not communicating effectively, how are you? You missed the best part of the session. It was my wife. And I know, thank you for sharing that. Everybody knows that. But I want to be known for certain things. By the way, the same applies to you. You're leaving this great conference. What do you want to be known for? I want to be known as an advocate for family. That's useful. I want to be known as a follower of a faith. That's useful. Begin to create a culture or a brand of what we want to be known for. And that establishes institutions that outlive individuals. Let's jump to 30. We'll skip that one. We'll skip that one. We'll skip that one. We'll skip that one. How many have heard something this week that they want to do differently? Ooh, what's something? We're going to pick people who've not talked yet. You've talked, but you'll talk again. What do you want to do differently?
I want to
speak out.
I want to make people realize the impact of pornography.
Nice.
In a very visceral way.
I want to help people recognize that pornography is destructive, that it takes away from relationships, that it destroys trust. Super. Who else has heard something from outside America? I want folks from outside America. We've had only Americans speaking. You guys, you're a Canadian, eh? 51st state. Who cares? What is it? That was, by the way, just anger is an emotion that keeps you alert. So what is it you want to do differently?
I want to be strong in my beliefs and not stay quiet when I can't stand for my beliefs.
I want to stand up for what I believe. Not to be annoying about it, but live the gospel and sometimes use words. What a wonderful statement. What do we find? What percent of time? Well, we did a book. Let's go to the next slide. This is one of my well, actually, this is a great example. This is not good commitment. Notice, this happens in America, not Canada. This is bad commitment. You don't take an escalator to a fitness exercise. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is one of my two favorite paragraphs of first paragraphs of books I've written. A group of turkeys attend a 4-day training program to learn how to fly with their families. They learn the principles of aerodynamics. They practice flying in the morning, afternoon, and evening. They fly with the wind, against it, over mountains and plains, together and by themselves. At the end of the days, they all walk home. Here's what we've discovered. You've had a great 4 days. And the scholarship that Mrs. Swim and others have offered has just been a remarkable privilege. But it cannot be an event. It has to be a pattern. It has to become a culture. It has to become our identity. It has to become how we're seen by others. How do we sustain it? How do we actually make that happen around pornography? How do I live my values in a way that others will see and respect? I'm going to give you 7 tips, and I'm going to ask you to pick 2. So I'm going to walk through 7 tips of the research on sustainability, and I'm going to ask you to pick 2. 1, keep it simple. Don't leave here trying to change 10 things. If you're trying to change 10 things about your behavior, what's going to happen? Nothing. Good is the enemy of great. Remember, divergent, convergent. Somewhere in the next day or 2, focus and share with your partner. Boy, we had a lot of great talks. And by the way, it's going to be different. Yours is going to be a project you work on. Somebody else's is going to be another project. Somebody else's is beliefs. Pick the 1 or 2 things you will focus on. Number 2, make sure it shows up in your calendar. We ran a mission for a Christian church for 3 years. At the end of that mission, a young man came to me and he said, I've just lived for 2 years following a set of religious principles. I'm now going to join the U.S. Army, and it's going to be tough to live my principles. True or false? What would you say to him? No, it'll be real easy. Has anyone been in the military? Your brother has real simple to live values and principles and righteousness. And everybody in the military agrees. In fact, he said, here's what I'm going to do the first day. There's 50 of us in the group. I'm going to yell out, I'm now going to pray. Would you all be quiet? What advice would you give them? Don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to learn fists and you're going to be mocked. He said, so how do I manage my time to do it? I'm going to give you a tip. By the way, you're going to pick one of these 7. Keep it simple. Number 2, time. 4 threes. When you go home from this conference, for the first 3 hours, do something differently. Live your values for 3 hours. What does that mean? You're going to go home, your roommate, your parents, your spouse, your siblings, somebody's going to say, what did you learn? I learned that pornography is destructive. 3 hours, do something really simple. Second 3, do it for 3 days. In the next 3 days, do something. The third 3 is do it for 3 weeks. And the fourth 3 is do it for 3 months. At the end of 3 weeks, you've begun to change your pattern. At the end of 3 months, you begin to change your identity. And now that culture, how others see you, begins to reinforce what you do. That's time. Number 3, become accountable. I think Wendy said that so well. We make mistakes. Well, let me do the accountability. How many have made a mistake in the last month? Super. What do you do when you make a mistake? Run into it. Repent. Acknowledge it. I was in Dubai giving a talk about a year ago. Hi, Jim. Good to see you. I was in Dubai giving a talk about a year ago, 1,500 people. And I love to joke with the group, and there were 1,500 Emiratis and people from that area. A bunch of folks were sitting on couches. And I thought, oh, man, you must be tired. It's kind of tough to, have to sit on the couch. I hope you can stay awake. And I made fun of them a little bit. We took a break. The person who hosted me came up and he said, Professor, the people on the couches are the royal family. It is not good advice to mock them in front of their citizens. By the way, I had an epiphany. I became accountable. I went back and I said, my name is Tom Peters. Look for him as you go through customs. That's not my name. And I apologized. I said, I was wrong. The people on the couches are handsome and exciting and marvelous people. Be accountable. When you make a mistake, face it. Run into it. Number 4, get help. Resources. Managing a change that's sustainable is very difficult to do by yourself. Number 5, track it. Measure it. What are the results? What am I seeing? And number 6 that Wendy talked about, ameliorate. How do I improve? How do I get better? And finally, express my passion for what I do. So everybody circle 2 of those you'll do that will help you implement what you want to get better at. Just circle 2 or pick 2. Is it getting specific? Is it managing behavior and time? Is it being accountable in public? Is it resources? Is it tracking? Is it ameliorate and improving? Is it emotion? Which 2 will I work on to improve what I want to do better? Now I'm going to give you an exercise. Have you got 2? Have you got some? How many have something they want to improve on because they've been here this week? Okay, I'm now going to go to the accountable board. Take out your cell phone. Take out your computer device. I'd like you to send a text or an email to somebody and share with them what you're committed to do and what you're going to try to do to be better. Take 1 minute, send a text or an email to somebody of what you'll do and your commitment to try to be better because you've been here this week. The only time in a training program somebody said, take out your cell phone. Don't read all your other messages. Well, send a text or an email. Do you have a cell phone? Your phone is dead? I hope your spirit's not. 20 seconds. And that'll keep you from answering all the other texts and emails you've gotten. How many sent this to somebody in their family? Super. How many send it to somebody at work or school? Nobody? Who sent it to themselves? Oh, that's called narcissism. We want you to do something that will help you sustain the change you've got. Next slide. This is our agenda. This is our agenda. Now we're going to take a few minutes to do questions. We have about 10, 15 minutes for some questions. By the way, we'll answer any question you ask. I didn't say when. We may answer it at 10 o'clock tonight to each other, but we'll answer any question that we can try to model as you begin to think through. Internalize, how do I apply these ideas? What do I want? How do I grow? Influence, how do I influence those around me? Institutionalize, how do I build a culture? How do I build an identity for myself and others? And embed it, how do I sustain it? So, let's, any questions at all that we can answer about things you've heard this week or any questions at all? And then I'll turn it back over to Wendy. Yeah, and let me, I'm going to use microphone this way.
I guess one of the things you keep on hearing is the work-life balance. I really don't know what that means, to be honest. How is it that you and your husband work as a team together?
Nobody else knows what work-life balance is either, by the way. This is the most common question I get when I'm doing coaching in business settings from both men and women, is how do you manage that balance? And frankly, there isn't a good answer. And what works for us will not work for you. How we put our lives together will not be something that will work for you. It takes just a lot of talking and a lot of sharing and a lot of honesty and sometimes some very hard discussions. I've been really impressed, though, with the idea, think about a balance ball, one of those balls, those big rubber balls that you do, exercises on and stuff. Why do you do those on a balance ball? What's the value of the balance ball? It strengthens your core how? Somebody said core. Yeah, it strengthens your core because you're constantly moving, trying to stay on top of the ball, right? That's work-life balance. You get clearer about what matters to you and you get better at it because it's a moving target and you're constantly having to adjust. You're constantly having to move to make it work. There isn't just a simple answer to this.
Two or three thoughts, though, that might help. One, not everything worth doing is worth doing well. I think sometimes we try to excel at everything. You're high talent, you're high end, you're the best of the best. You don't have to be the best at everything. I did undergraduate degree very quickly. I had good grades. I graduated really high, went to do a PhD program. I learned something. Grades don't matter in a PhD program. Is anyone doing a PhD? Your husband is? Grades don't matter. What matters is, are you publishing? Are you teaching? Are you learning? So I had a required course, I'm going to get in trouble here, called Phenomenology. Who's ever had a course in phenomenology? How interesting was it? Okay, that was my take. So I went to the dean and I said, I got to take this course. And they said, you do? And I said, do I have to pass it? And they said, we've never been asked that. And I said, for me to pass a course in phenomenology, I'm not all that smart, I'm going to spend 200 hours. I'd rather spend 200 hours publishing 3 papers and get an F in phenomenology. And they told me, it's got to be on your transcript. I said, done. It is. So I went to the professor. I said, I don't know you, but I'm going to get an F in your class. You'll never see me again. And I'm going to publish 3 papers that will help me get a better job. By the way, sometimes I think we have to excel at everything. I think I graduated at UCLA with the lowest grade point average in the history of the PhD program. I got 2 Fs. And I'm proud of those Fs because those Fs represent 4 or 5 papers I published. So here's the takeaway. By the way, this won a Nobel Prize in economics. It's called Satisfice, F-I-C-E. Not everything worth doing is worth doing well. There's a whole lot of things that we don't have to be excellent at. Just get them done. That's one hint in work-life balance. By the way, there are other things we do have to be excellent at. When my mom says my dad's sick, is that when I satisfice? I'll give him a call, I'll Facebook him. No, I'm going home. I think there's a few things we will not delegate. I hope this week has helped you recognize through your values the things that matter most. My faith, my family, my freedom, I think you get those things that we will not satisfy, and we will stand up and be counted for. The other things, okay. What have you satisfied? Oh. By the way, the other hint, I'll give you one other hint. It's a long life. We both did PhDs. We struggled with kids, and it was hard. Did we ever struggle?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. And you know what? It's great when the kids grow up and leave home. No. There is hope smiling brightly before you. It's called Your Kids Will Grow Up. And some of the older adults in the room say, don't tell them that secret. You think your parents are sad you've gone. They're not sad. They're delighted. Don't ever go home again. You don't have to be everything at once right now, to your question. I think we want to excel. Wendy has published 6 books in the last 10 years after the youngest child left home. By the way, there's a cycle of life that we can manage. And I think sometimes gaining that perspective is hard. Next question. Any burning questions? Yes. Hang on, this is...
What advice do you have as far as, well, I studied music education, and so we didn't have to read a lot of like psychological studies, social science studies, I mean, now and again. But I feel like that's one thing I want to change from this conference is to be able to know the research that's out there. And sometimes I'll find a study and start reading it and go, I don't understand this lingo. What advice do you have as far as like diving into that and getting help to be able to understand it?
Do it. Just keep doing it. It's like learning a new language. It really, truly is. When I started my PhD program, they were giving me all this stuff I had to read, and I swear, I thought, this is in Greek. I swear it is. And I had to read like one word of one sentence at a time and look up the ones I didn't understand even. It was the most humiliating experience to try to learn this new language. It does take a while. It is a new language. Sometimes you have to learn the language of English, sometimes you have to learn the language of the spirit, sometimes you have to learn the language of sociology, and it does take time. If you've got the growth mindset, then you stick with it.
What instrument do you play? You play the piano.
How long
Who
did
here
that
is
take
not
you?
very good at piano? Who here took piano lessons and the teacher went to the parents and said, I'm stealing your money? My teacher went to the parents and said, I hate to say it, I'm stealing your money, and I'm feeling guilty after 3 years. If you were giving me advice about being better at the piano, what would you tell me? Keep practicing. Stick with it. Take your own advice. Read that article. It doesn't make any sense. By the way, I'm now going to tell you a real secret. Why do academics put big fancy words around simple ideas? So that people think they're smart. We had a contest once as a professor. We wanted to find the most stupid idea that was published in an academic journal and go to an academic conference and award it. Here's what we found. People who drive faster as race car drivers make more money. By the way, that's not the way it was framed. It was framed as an institutional study of total compensation systems in structured systems with enterprise race drivers. You drive faster, you make more money. So, I mean, by the way, get behind it. The ideas are really simple. Academics aren't all that smart. I'm going to do microphone. And then I'll go back here if I could. So do you have a handheld that we can get to this one?
Sometimes I'm suspicious that I cling to my old identities and I'm afraid to change. So could you speak a little bit about the journey of growth and becoming a new person and being okay with that, even though it might be scary for some people?
Do you have a sheet of paper? Make it 2 by 2. So if you have a sheet of paper, do it 2 by 2. Right, the 2 columns, the right thing, the wrong thing. So I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing the wrong thing. Got it? 2 columns. The rows, well and poorly. So it's a 2 by 2. The right thing, the wrong thing, doing it well, doing it poorly. Which cell do I want to be in? Cell 1. I want to do the right thing well. Which is the worst cell to be in? Doing the wrong thing well. One of the fears of change is we get locked into what we do well and we keep doing it everywhere. One of the lessons of change is we're going to do the right thing poorly to get to the right thing well. And so my coaching of you in change is don't be afraid to do the right thing. Wendy, when you started therapy, or not therapy, when you started being a therapist, did you know exactly how to do it?
Absolutely not.
I remember some of the early couples you met with, you came and said, oh my gosh, they're not paying for this, and they're getting what they're paying for. By the way, I started consulting. I remember sitting with one leader. It was a privately held company 30 years ago. His name was on the door. And he said, oh, I'm really struggling with what I should do. Should I restructure? Should I not? Should I fire this person? And I just babbled. And the next day, somebody called and said, he fired 3 people last night and he restructured according to what you said. And I thought, holy smokes, that's really stupid. Why would he do that? That's just what we making stuff up. Do the right thing wrong. And then have a growth mindset. What did I do well? What did I do poorly? How do I improve it? And face that fear. So that the right thing well is where you want to be, but doing the wrong thing well is very dangerous.
Okay, we got another question back here. Is it you?
Yes. So can you apply this to finding a spouse and raising a family? And if so, how would you go about doing that?
I'm holding the microphone, so you have to answer the question.
And you know what I think we should do is have Mrs. Swim answer that because she's the matron of this. No, I don't want to. Yeah. Okay, let's do a spouse. Wendy said it. As we look for a spouse, how many of us have a checklist in our mind of the 10 perfect things our spouse will be? Let me dissuade
you're
you.
Just stretching.
It's not going to happen. Here's some of the research on relationships. What % of problems in marriage are never solved? What % of... Who's married recently? Are there any tension in your marriage? None.
They're in the honeymoon phase.
They're in the honeymoon phase.
They're in the honeymoon
By the way,
phase.
let me tell you one. We're 40 years in marriage. I tend to like to be early. Wendy doesn't tend to come to events quite as early, sometimes.
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 This is absolutely, absolutely always true, yes.
10 years of marriage, I go in the car and honk the horn. Good or bad solution? Stupid solution. You know what? After 40 years, we're not going to fix that one. We're not going to fix that one. What percent of, raise your hand, what percent of problems are never fixed? 100% are never fixed, 20% are never fixed, 10% are never fixed. What percent of problems are never fixed?
And if you heard my talk yesterday, you're not allowed to vote.
What percent are never fixed? The answer is 65 to 70%. You know what about marriage? Don't look for perfection. What would you look for? If you're married, stand up. If you're married, stand up. What advice would you have, real quick? What do you look for in a great partner?
You have the core values.
You share values. Super. What would you look for in a great partner?
Really nice.
Really sexy? Nice. Okay. I just didn't know if I got that right. What would you look for in a great partner?
God is your priority.
You both share a common value set. And it could be around deity. It could be around the divine. What would you see in a great marriage?
You marry potential.
You marry for the future. Boy, that's so lucky that you did that. What else would you see in great marriage? You're loyal. No hesitation, no doubts. There's a deep devotion there. You missed one or two things. Either one. You work together. Good.
Willingness to work hard.
Okay, you guys. Oh, hold it, hold it, hold it. We've got the senior couples here. And it's cool, they can stand up. So, what would you say, Mrs. Sheen?
My answer was already given. Actually, loyalty and working together.
Loyalty. What would you say? Willing to overlook. That our partner is not perfect. Some of the times. Committed. By the way, have a seat. I think you've got the ideas. By the way, my takeaway for that, Wendy has a word called anticipatory regret. As you find somebody you feel close to, as you get closer to that event, do you want to...
The closer you get, the more you start anticipating the things you're going to regret. Okay? That's the basic theory here. The closer you get to actually making the commitment and deciding, the more you start thinking, hold it, wait a minute, this is a bad idea. That's normal. People look at more cars after they buy a car than before they buy a car, okay? Before you buy the car, you're just overwhelmed with the decision. There's too many options. You just sort of pick something, and you do your best, and you go forward. After you buy the car, you start looking around, make sure you made the right choice. So you're not going to do it perfectly. It's okay. If you've got enough of those basic things in common, the most important thing you want to do is how do we have a growth mindset about this relationship? You don't just fall into a relationship worth perpetuating. You grow into it. One more question. Please, yes.
On that, except it's not an important one. No, somebody, it's really silly.
All right,
That's
silly
the last
questions
one.
are good.
Okay, well, on that, oh, it's so silly. I hate that's the last one. Okay. On that whole thing of you're never going to know, this is a relationship thing, your comments on the one.
My comments on the one, I don't think there is a one. I just don't. I don't think there is a one. Except in my case, in which case there was a one. But for most of us, there isn't. We can make relationships work with a lot of people. If we're both willing to trust each other, to forgive each other, to apologize when we're wrong, to work together, to solve problems together, it doesn't have to be perfect going in. If you were to find the one person on this planet who is your soulmate, how long would it take you to sift through 6 billion people to find them? So we all tend to have sort of a predisposition to either jump quickly into a decision because we don't like the anxiety of not knowing. It makes us really uncomfortable. So we just want to fall in love, make the decision, and get on with it. Because we don't like not knowing. We want it over with. That's kind of the fixed mindset approach, maybe. Some of us don't like another kind of anxiety. We don't like the anxiety of the options being shut off. We don't like the anxiety of thinking there might be somebody better out there if I wait a little longer. If you find someone like that, run. Okay? Run. We have to be willing to sort of know our own predisposition and fight it a little bit. If you tend to jump fast, slow down a little. If you tend to be afraid of the commitment, get yourself in the door. Ask God to help you. Ask your parents' advice. They often know better than you do. But don't spend forever looking for the perfect partner. Be realistic about the people who are out there and know you're not perfect either. So why would they marry you if they're perfect, right? Get on, keep moving. Oh, we got more questions. Okay. All right, we got a man question.
So in the mind of the growth mindset, how did you guys make the decision to just jump off the cliff into marriage even when you weren't totally economically stable?
We were so uneconomically stable it wasn't even funny.
I think you have a leap of faith. I mean, I'll give an honest answer that won't be yours. We turned to God. And we said, Dear Heavenly Father, dear Lord, would you confirm this? And the answer was, you guys are nuts. Yes. And by the way, that may not be your answer. But I think there is that leap of faith that inevitably you take. And for me, by the way, it may not have been hers. Hers was desperation maybe. But for me, that's not true at all. Oh, man. We need to have another couple questions. By the way, my wife's a psychologist. That was called a Freudian slip that's going to take 24 hours to unravel. That was horrible. By the way, for me, it was literally a leap of faith. And I felt that it was divinely inspired that I would be confirmed by that choice.
Now, let me just say about that. My daughter made a leap of faith. She also prayed. She also got an answer. Go ahead. That marriage ended in divorce. Is that a tragedy? Yes and no. Very, very hard, very, very sad. She gave birth to their second child, or their first child, after 24 hours of hard labor and many hours of hard pushing. And 5 minutes later, she said, I would sign up for that again 10 times before I will go through another divorce. That was after her second marriage, not out of wedlock, but it was extremely excruciating. And one of the questions she really wrestled with was, why would God give me the okay to go ahead when it didn't work despite everything I could do to try to make it better? But she will also tell you, I learned things by going through that experience I don't think I could have learned any other way. I am a better person for having been through that very painful, difficult process. So if we keep going to our God to redeem our mistakes, do we believe he has the power to do that? I think it's interesting. I'm a Christian. I think it's interesting to look in the Bible at all the different names for Jesus in the Bible. He's the Lamb of God. He's the Almighty. He's the Holy One of Israel. He's all 100 names. He is never called the preventer. Never. Not once. He's the Savior. Why? Because we need to be saved. But he has the power. I truly believe if we turn to him, he has the ability to promise us that he will not let anything happen to us that he cannot redeem for our good. That he cannot make better. He cannot make us better. That he cannot still make of us the best person we are capable of being, no matter what's happened to us, because his power to redeem is that great. Now that's my little soapbox, and I apologize to those of you who... So we do the best we can, we make the best decision we can, we give it everything we have, and we trust that he can redeem it, even if we fail. Okay, are we done? Study these pictures carefully. What do you see? Tell me what you see. What do you see? What words would you use to describe this? Chaos? Mess? Poor planning? Problems? Danger? Horrifying? What is this? Where is this country? This is India, the place the world calls with technical computer problems. Does that make anybody nervous? Do we focus on what is missing or what is available? We look at those pictures and we see what's missing. Order, safety, those are the things we see. What do the good people of India see when they look at that mess? Opportunity, potential. We have electricity. We can use this. Do we pay more attention to our weaknesses or to our strengths? Are we focused on what's wrong or on what's right? A lot of us are asking today, what's the meaning of life? Viktor Frankl came out of a concentration camp in World War II, and he said, ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but he must recognize that it is he who is asked. So you have the opportunity today to be asked by life, what will the meaning of your life be? And to ask yourself, what do I want the meaning of my life to be? It's not a question I get to just ask the cosmos to answer for me. The cosmos asks me, what will be the meaning of your life? I hope as a result of this conference, your life will have a different sense of purpose, that you'll have a little more clarity about what you want your life to stand for. Thank you for being with us today.